Super Bowl 59, Eagles, Chiefs, a rematch of 2 years ago. So many storylines are here. I mean, we have the Chiefs going for a three-peat, the Eagles looking for redemption after losing the Super Bowl 2 years ago. It's a revenge game. Saquon Barkley is on his revenge tour against the New York Giants and trying to cap off an epic season. Andy Reid's looking for ring number 4 against his former team yet again. Jalen Hurts is looking to win his first ring. Vic Fangio is looking to beat Patrick Mahomes for the first time in his career. And I mean, the list goes on and on. And we'll talk about the storylines once the game is actually transpired. But I mean, I'm really excited to preview this because this is going to be a really fun game from start to finish. I think that both teams are super evenly matched. And let's start off with the Eagles offense against the Chiefs defense, because we know that with this extra week, Coach Spags is going to find anything in his bag of tricks to stop Saquon Barkley. It's clear that Saquon Barkley is the engine to the Eagles offense, and if there's any way that the Chiefs are going to win this game, it's going to have to limit the damage of Saquon Barkley's play. I don't expect Saquon to rip off a 50-yard plus touchdown, but it's really just limiting the body blows and then the eventual knockout punch, because against teams like the Ravens in the past, I mean, they've been a historically good rushing defense, and eventually the dam broke and Saquon busted out for a touchdown run to essentially ice the game in that matchup. Spagnuolo historically has done a great job against running backs. I mean, he has yet to allow a 100-yard rusher in his entire Chiefs tenure as their defensive coordinator. And if you look back at some of the offenses he's been able to limit, I think about the last time these two teams met, the Eagles had a very highly potent rushing attack, and they basically eliminated the running backs. Miles Sanders and Boston Scott had no contributions to that game at all from a rushing standpoint, and it was really on the shoulders of Jalen Hurts to provide any type of running attack. If you think about last year in the Super Bowl against Christian McCaffrey, the offensive player of the year, they limited him. He didn't have 100 yards rushing. I think he was actually below 4 yards a carry, and it seemed like everything they tried with him, they had to earn it. I think this year is going to be the toughest test for Steve Spagnuolo. This defense isn't quite the same as it used to be, and additionally, they actually have been a little bit leaky from a yards per carry standpoint. Joe Mixon and James Cook both had effectiveness, but the problem was their offenses did not stick with running the ball. Joe Mixon had over 4.5 yards a carry, and actually James Cook went for over 6 yards a pop. And for whatever reason, the offensive coordinators did not stick with running game in those two playoff matchups, but that does bode well for the Philadelphia Eagles, because Jeff Stoutland has done a fantastic job in, yet again, finding guys off the street, whether it's Mekhi Becton, and then also shifting around players like Cam Jurgens from right guard to center, and then even in the championship game when Cam had to miss at least the first half, they put Landon Dickerson at center and kind of shuffled things around. Tyler Steen played great at left guard in substitution. But this defensive line for the Kansas City Chiefs is going to be challenged, because we've seen in the past the Eagles offensive line mow down great defensive lines. They had a good job despite giving up some sacks against the LA Rams. They still mowed them down and had over 200 yards rushing, and they did the same thing against the Commanders. And I don't think the same rushing output in terms of 200 yards rushing as a team is going to happen against the Chiefs, because I mean, let's look at it. I mean, they have Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, Mike Dana. There's a very deep defensive line that is sneaky good. It's not just Chris Jones, a one-man band. He takes up a lot of blocks and is very disruptive, but he does create lanes for the other guys to finish off and limit the damage. But like I said, this offensive line for the Eagles is different. I mean, from left to right with Jordan Mailata, a healthy Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Mekhi Becton, and Lane Johnson, they all are north of 300 pounds, and I think their total combined weight is around 1,800 pounds. That is a lot of beef up front. And it's all gonna be starting up front, whether it's creating time in the pocket for Jalen Hurts to throw or also creating running lanes for Saquon Barkley. Because if they don't do that, I think it could be a long day for the Eagles offense. But I do have confidence that the Eagles offensive line can create some holes. And to be honest, even with loaded boxes, Saquon Barkley has had great performances and great rushing games against loaded boxes. I mean, honestly, he's played against loaded boxes all year, and he's still found ways to navigate them for long touchdown runs. But like I've been saying, this offense is not just about Saquon Barkley. It's also Jalen Hurts, who's coming off of a great game in the NFC title game. He had 4 touchdowns in that game, 3 on the ground, 1 through the air, kind of mirroring his amazing Super Bowl performance in Super Bowl 57. They're gonna need a great performance from Jalen Hurts against this Kansas City Chiefs defense, and Jalen Hurts has a bevy of options out there. He has Dallas Goedert, who's their leading receiver in the postseason, second team All-Pro AJ Brown, and sneaky wide receiver number 2 Devontae Smith. I think probably you're gonna see a lot of Trent McDuffie on Devontae Smith, and then they're gonna try and put a collective effort to try and limit the damage that AJ Brown can do. But regardless of what they do, whether Trent McDuffie says I'm just traveling with AJ Brown all over the field, and then we're gonna see what Smitty can do. But the recent few matchups that Smitty has played against the Kansas City Chiefs, he's gone for at least 99 yards, and I think that does prove to be a good matchup, because if he's going against Trent, well, AJ Brown is going against your CB2. But if you're putting McDuffie on AJ, well, I'm pretty sure Devontae Smith can replicate that type of success he's had in recent years against Steve Spagnuolo. Dallas Goedert has been an emphasis in the postseason, and I really think that this is an opportunity for him to have a huge game. He's going to have some favorable matchups because the Chiefs linebackers have been decent, but I also think that they're going to be probably playing a little bit lower in the box to try and get more pressure on Jalen, and that could create some throwing lanes for Dallas Goedert to get open across the middle or on those tight end screens that we've seen in this postseason. Something that's really been apparent recently has been the short yardage situations, because the Chiefs stopped the Bills' tush-push attempts 3 out of 5 times in that AFC Championship game. And we know that Jalen prefers to go low, and he definitely has some variability with which side he goes on compared to Josh Allen, who goes high and goes behind left guard. So I think that the Eagles offensive line is going to have some creative looks as well, because it's not just the same cookie cutter, well, we're just going to go right behind center, we're going to go right behind left guard. Jalen has some improv in the tush push, and I think him getting just that lower center of gravity is just going to be hard for those big guys for the Chiefs to locate him, especially behind all that beef, like I said, with the Eagles offensive line. But the Eagles offensive line, particularly Cam and Landon, have been injured in this postseason run. So far, they haven't shown up in the injury report, but it is something to be watching in this Super Bowl, because if something flares up, we're going to see maybe some shifting in the offensive line mid-game. Now, the Eagles offense has all the tools to navigate this Chiefs defense, but something that they have to be aware of is the turnovers and exotic blitz packages, because in Super Bowl 57, the Eagles really messed up in the first half when Spags sent Nick Bolton on a blitz and Jalen Hurts could not hold on to the ball, and that was a scoop and score for the Chiefs. That turnover didn't happen. I think the Eagles win that game, but in this game in particular, they have to continue the trend, play clean football, because so far the turnover margin has been big dividends in this postseason so far. Teams that turn over the ball, they're unlikely to win that game, and teams that play clean football, they have a really good record in this postseason, at least in 2024. Something else that they'll have to do offensively, Nick Sirianni is going to have to dial up the aggression. I know sometimes he can be a little bit conservative or make some interesting decisions. Well, I think the biggest concern is just leaving points on the board, especially when it's 4th and 5 and you're inside, if you're midfield and beyond. I think you have to start going for it because you have to match the Chiefs' aggression as well, but you have to think about maximizing your offensive possessions. Yeah, you could punt, play field position, or yeah, you could settle for 3, but when you have Patrick Mahomes staring at you on the opposite side of the field, well, one thing is you can burn more clock, and also you just have so many options available to you that I think that the Eagles are going to be hella aggressive coming into this matchup against the Chiefs. I think it's going to be a big test, but I think this is probably going to be a distinct advantage for the Eagles that we did not see in Super Bowl 57, where their run offense was kind of shut down. But this time with a talented back like Saquon Barkley, and also just this pick your poison type of offense, that I think we're going to see bigger performances from the Eagles offense. Now, flipping into the defensive side, it's been on record. Vic Fangio does not have a good record. In fact, he's 0-8 against Patrick Mahomes, and that goes back to his days as Denver Broncos head coach and also a couple of games as the Miami Dolphins DC last season. Looking at his time in Denver, Vic Fangio didn't have great quarterback play, and his offense unfortunately gave up a defensive score in several matchups. So being down or spotting Patrick Mahomes' defensive points isn't going to do his own defense any favor. I think in this particular matchup, this is probably his best shot to beat Mahomes. He has so much talent from top to bottom. And if you want to talk about just how these two teams have looked compared to Super Bowl 57 to Super Bowl 59, mainly the defense is looked so much different. Compared to Super Bowl 57, a bulk of the defensive starters are no longer with the team. Yes, Super Bowl 57's team had the 70 sack season, but they've replenished that with several young, talented players, especially on the defensive side. The defense is actually the youngest defense in the entire NFL, and that's paid big dividends for them being the #1 ranked defense in the entire league. Since that Super Bowl matchup, Howie Roseman went into the lab. He got a bunch of Georgia Bulldogs that include Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, and Keely Ringo. But mainly talking about the two Bulldogs up front, Jalen Carter is a game wrecker. He's been phenomenal in this postseason, and he could be the next best defensive tackle of the future. Nolan Smith, who's been quiet in his rookie year, has come on as of late and actually leads the postseason with 4 sacks. If they can get home on Patrick Mahomes without having to blitz, that's going to be a big factor in them limiting the damage of what Mahomes can do. Because if you really want to find a way to beat Mahomes, you're going to have to channel whatever tape that the Bucs had in 2020 in Super Bowl 55, where they got after Mahomes early and often. And I do think that this offensive line isn't the same as what it used to be. They've had some shuffling, and I think that Joe Thuney at tackle is a lot different than Joe Thuney at center or guard. Whatever the matchup is, whether it's Josh Sweat or Nolan Smith, I think that's going to be an advantage for the Eagles because Joe Thuney is not accustomed to playing on the outside as a tackle. Something of note for this defensive line for the Eagles is that longtime veteran Brandon Graham could be on track to returning for the big game. He tore his triceps in November against the LA Rams and was projected to miss the rest of the season, but since then he's actually made significant improvement in rehab, and it seems like he's going to give it a go. And I'm not sure exactly what he can do from a production standpoint, but I really feel that his presence, especially being the Eagles' most tenured veteran, he has experience in the Super Bowl. He's played in 2 previous Super Bowls and had probably the most iconic play in Eagles history, stripping Tom Brady in Super Bowl 52. Well, maybe this gives the Eagles defensive line and even the defense as a whole a little bit more juice. I remember when Ray Lewis announced his retirement, and that kind of spurred the Ravens defense to pick it up, and they went on this magical fairy tale ride, also in New Orleans, mind you, and they won the Super Bowl against the San Francisco 49ers. When you go to the middle of the defense, it's obviously starting off with Zach Bond. Zach Bond is a first-team All-Pro linebacker, and I think his coverage against Travis Kelce is going to be really, really key. Now, I don't think that Vaughn is a great pass coverage linebacker, but he is pretty decent and he's always around the football. And it's going to be tricky because Kelce, despite his age, is a little bit crafty, so I'm sure there's going to be some tricks that he's going to get Vaughn in coverage. But if he can make a difference in run support and also just be part of some random blitz packages that we've seen so far, I'm pretty sure that Zach Vaughn will have an impact playing sideline to sideline. And if the ball's on the ground, expect to see Zach Vaughn somewhere near the pile. If you look at the secondary, obviously headlined by CJ Gardner-Johnson and Darius Slay, but also rookies like Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell. Quinion Mitchell is going to be tasked with a lot of zone coverage, but when he's in man, he definitely is a little bit more average. But I think the big thing for this Eagles secondary is going to be staying disciplined, because we remember on the goal line when the Chiefs were running that jet motion and they just got the Eagles on a consistent basis. They unfortunately fooled them twice in mirror images on either side of the field, where they ran in and out and they just had an open walk-in touchdown to Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore. Watching that coverage is going to be very, very key, but also just forcing Mahomes to hold onto the ball and maybe have an opportunity for coverage sacks, because they're very sticky. I think the Eagles defensive backs, especially on the back end, are very, very sticky to receivers, because these receivers for the Kansas City Chiefs have a lot of wiggle to them, and mainly a lot of speed, starting off with Xavier Worthy. He's come on as a rookie, especially in the postseason, but you also have Hollywood Brown that's gotten into the mix late in the season, but you also have Juju Smith-Schuster, who's coming back after a stint with the New England Patriots, and DeAndre Hopkins, who maybe isn't as much what he used to be, but he still is an effective red zone target. The running backs is going to be a collective effort for the Chiefs, because you have Isaiah Pacheco, who always runs angry, Kareem Hunt, who's kind of on this redemption tour. I think a sneaky aspect in this Chiefs running back room is Samaje Perine, because he's kind of that scat back that is a pass-catching running back. Expect him to be part of the screen game if the Eagles dial up pressure with blitzes. And yeah, that's pretty effective against Mahomes, but if that ball gets out to one of these receivers or a running back like Perine, well, he's a threat to do a lot of damage, because especially in the postseason, he's done a lot of damage when he's in space catching the ball. He ended that game in the AFC Championship game, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's used in certain packages against the Eagles. I expect Andy Reid to get creative against Vic Fangio, because in the Super Bowl, there's always some type of iconic play or a trick play that the Chiefs do. And he's been saving something, I'm sure, and there's going to be a lot of times where we'll see Mahomes get loose, whether it's for a back-breaking scramble on 3rd and long, and those are things you're just going to have to live with. Unfortunately, Mahomes is just this ungodly player that can scramble around and just make you look silly. But I would also say that they should juggle that with being disciplined, but also being smart, because it's one thing to play physical, but if you play stupid and play after the whistle, especially with the Chiefs and how the referees like to favor them, I think that's something to be concerned about, because anything that's ticky-tack, I definitely know that it's going to be on the Chiefs and it's going to be in their favor. The pass rush has to get home against the Kansas City Chiefs. The last time these two teams played, they played in Arizona, and that was obviously marred by that terrible field conditions that many people noticed, that it was kind of like a slip and slide, and I don't think that it affected any team more like the Eagles, where they really depended on their pass rush. But again, that really comes down to footing. Thankfully, it's going to be played in the Caesars Superdome, so I believe that's an artificial turf, so that's not going to be any type of field conditions that we have to particularly worry about. But footing is really, really important, but getting home is probably more important. Now, time for a prediction. Obviously, in this game, it has a lot of storylines. The Eagles are looking for revenge, and I think against any other team in this playoff mix, this would be the Eagles favored heavily. But I think the only reason why the Chiefs are in this is obvious, because they have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. If you look at the Eagles from top to bottom, they have the better roster from 1 to 53. But the difference is all-time great quarterback and an all-time great head coach. And we've seen that with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, and now we're seeing it with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Remember, football is a team game, and I think that sometimes we kind of lose sight the aura that the Chiefs have and just think that they're totally unbeatable. The Chiefs should be favored, don't get me wrong, but I also don't think that they're a better team than the Eagles. I think the Eagles have been the better team throughout the entire season, especially after the bye week. And I think that the biggest advantage is Saquon Barkley as the ultimate trump card for the Eagles offense that will not only can gash you for long gains, but also just wear down your defense and keep Patrick Mahomes on the sideline, because the best thing against a historically great quarterback is just put him on the sideline and make him be a spectator, because he can't hurt you when he's on the sideline. And if the Eagles possess the ball for at least like 35 minutes, I think that's going to be a big time advantage for the Eagles, because there's only so many limited opportunities that the Chiefs and Mahomes can have with the football. I think the running attack is going to open up things in the passing game. I like Trent McDuffie, but I think if they had more of him, that would be helping them out. But there's no L'Jarius Sneed in this matchup, so wherever Trent McDuffie isn't, I think Jalen Hurts has to target that cornerback and go after them with a matchup on either Devontae Smith or AJ Brown. Vic Fangio has had his problems with Patrick Mahomes, but like I said earlier, this is a different group, especially defensively. And I think there's going to be some type of play that this Eagles defense makes compared to their matchup in Super Bowl 57. They never got home in that matchup, and they never forced any turnovers and made Mahomes seem uncomfortable. But I think in this matchup, you're either going to see some pass rush get home or some type of coverage sacks where these sticky cornerbacks or defensive backs stay with these receivers, and then they're going to have to find ways to force balls into tight windows, which Mahomes can do. And they might find ways to scheme guys open, but for the most part, it's been a lot of underneath stuff and not getting beat over the top. My prediction is that the Eagles offense starts hot and they force the Chiefs offense to play catch up throughout the entirety of the game. And just when you think they're gonna get caught, there's somebody on that defense for Vic Fangio who's gonna make a play and it's gonna clinch the victory for the Eagles. They will stop this Kansas City Chief bid for a three-peat, and they will avenge their loss from 2 years ago. So I'm predicting the Eagles winning Super Bowl 59.